The moment my sister Isabel said, "You have to sell it for the family," I knew she was about to destroy our relationship, but not in the way she'd planned. I was sitting in our childhood home, surrounded by the smell of my mother's lavender sachets and my father's leather-bound books. And my sister was telling me I was selfish for wanting to keep the 247-acre estate that had been in our family for 4 generations. The twist? Our parents had made me the sole beneficiary 3 years before they died, and Isabel had no idea. My name is Cassandra Mitchell. I'm 37 years old, and for the past 2 weeks, I'd been living in our family's historic estate in upstate New York, trying to process the fact that my parents were gone. The estate was called Millbrook, a name that came from the small creek that ran through the eastern boundary of the property. My great-grandfather had purchased it in 1956, a modest 140-acre property with a farmhouse. Over the decades, my father had expanded it, buying adjoining land, renovating the main house, building guest cottages, developing the grounds into something between a private compound and a family sanctuary. It was worth somewhere in the neighborhood of $12 million, though I hadn't had it formally appraised yet. My sister, Isabel, was younger by 4 years. She lived in Boston with her husband Derek and their 2 children. She'd always been the ambitious one, the one who'd moved away, built a career, created distance between herself and our small-town roots. I'd always been the one who stayed closer to home. I'd moved to Albany, about 90 minutes away, and built a career as an architectural historian. I'd visited Millbrook regularly. I'd helped my parents maintain it. In many ways, I'd been the daughter who'd shown up. What I didn't know, until 2 weeks ago, was what my parents thought about that. Isabel had arrived on Thursday afternoon, just as I was sorting through my mother's desk in the study. She'd come from Boston with Derek and their kids trailing behind, carrying overnight bags and the kind of purposeful energy that told me this wasn't a casual sympathy visit. "We need to talk," she'd said, settling herself on the leather sofa in front of the fireplace. "About Millbrook." I'd braced myself. I'd known this conversation was coming. "The estate taxes are going to be significant," she'd continued, her voice taking on the tone she used when she was about to deliver financial advice. Derek was a CPA, and Isabel had absorbed a lot of his language over the years. "The property is worth probably $12 million, maybe more. The state and federal estate taxes are going to be devastating. We're talking potentially $4 to $6 million in taxes alone. The easiest solution, the smartest solution, is to sell it. Split the proceeds. We could both be financially secure for life. We could pay off mortgages, fund college, handle debt. This is a life-changing opportunity." I'd set down the letters I'd been organizing. "That's not something we need to decide right now," I'd said. "The will hasn't even been formally probated yet. We have time." "Which is exactly why we need to talk about it now," Isabel had said. "Before you get emotionally attached. Before you start imagining yourself as the keeper of the family legacy. Cassandra, Mom and Dad are gone. This house, it's just a thing. It's not them. And keeping it is going to be a burden. The property taxes alone are going to be $30,000 a year. The maintenance is going to be constant. The heating bills in winter are going to be astronomical. You're going to spend all your time and money just keeping this place from falling apart." "Maybe that's what I want to do," I'd said quietly. "That's exactly what concerns me," Isabel had said, her voice softening slightly. "I think you're grieving. I think you re-clinging to this place because it feels like Mom and Dad are still here if you keep it maintained. But that's not healthy, Cassandra. And more importantly, it's not fair to the family. Mom and Dad's intention was probably for us to benefit from their estate equally. They built this place over a lifetime. They accumulated significant wealth. That wealth belongs to both of us. It's selfish to keep it all." "I haven't said I was keeping it all," I'd said. "I haven't said anything definitive yet." "But you're going to," Isabel had said. It wasn't a question. "I can see it in your face. You've already decided. And I'm here to tell you, that's not okay with me. This is family money. This is our parents' life's work. We need to be fair to each other." The guilt had settled in my chest like a stone. That was the thing about Isabel, she had a way of making me feel selfish for wanting anything for myself. She'd been doing it since childhood. When we were kids and our parents had taken us to the fair, she'd make it seem like my eating an ice cream was somehow robbing her of the opportunity. As teenagers, when I'd wanted to spend a Saturday reading, she'd make it seem like I was being antisocial by not wanting to go to the mall. And now, as adults, she was making it seem like my wanting to keep my own inheritance was a betrayal of family loyalty. "I need to talk to the estate attorney," I'd said finally. "I need to understand what exactly Mom and Dad left, and in what proportions. Then we can have a real conversation about this." I'd called the estate attorney, Miranda Okafor, the next morning. She'd been handling my parents' legal affairs for the past 15 years. She'd prepared their will. She'd managed the trust. She'd been their advisor on every major financial decision. I need to understand the distribution, I'd told her over the phone. My sister is pressuring me to sell the estate immediately, and I need to know exactly what I'm working with. What's the full inventory of the estate? And how is it divided between me and my sister? There had been a long pause on the other end of the line. When was the last time you read the will? Miranda had asked carefully. I haven't read it, I'd said. It just came from the probate court. I haven't opened it yet. I'm going to email it to you right now, Miranda had said. But Cassandra, I want to prepare you for something. Your parents made some very specific choices about how to structure their estate. You may want to sit down before you read this. I'd opened the email within minutes. The will was right there, formatted clearly, professionally prepared. I'd scrolled to the part that mattered, the property distribution section. It took me 3 reads to fully process what I was seeing. The entire estate, all 247 acres, the main house, the guest cottages, the barn, all structures and improvements, was left to me. Not to me and Isabel. Not to my daughters in equal shares. But specifically and exclusively to me, Cassandra Eleanor Mitchell. There was a secondary bequest to Isabel, $500,000 in a trust, to be administered separately, which would provide her with quarterly distributions of approximately $12,500 per year for life. It was a generous bequest. It was stable. It was generous. But it was not the estate. The estate, the crown jewel, the $12 million property that had been in our family for 4 generations, was mine alone. I'd called Miranda back immediately. Why? I'd asked. Why would they do this? Why would they leave the estate only to me? They wanted to speak with you about it, Miranda had said carefully. They were going to have that conversation, but your mother's health declined faster than expected. Your father wanted to wait until after she passed, but then he died 6 months later. They never got the chance to explain their reasoning to you. What was their reasoning? I'd asked. They felt that you'd shown the greatest commitment to maintaining Millbrook, Miranda had said. They noted in a memo, let me find it, yes, here, Cassandra has dedicated her professional life to preserving historical properties. She has visited Millbrook regularly and demonstrated genuine care for its maintenance and legacy. She has the expertise and the passion to preserve what we've built. Isabel has chosen a different path, and that's respectable, but her priorities lie elsewhere. We want Millbrook to be preserved, not liquidated. Therefore, we are leaving it to the daughter who will steward it with care and intention. I'd felt tears running down my face. There's more, Miranda had continued. Your father added a secondary provision. If you ever decided to sell the property, it would be sold with specific terms. First, Isabel would have the right of first refusal. She could purchase it at market value if she wished. Second, if sold to a third party, the proceeds would be split equally between you and her, regardless of how the original estate was distributed. Your father wanted to incentivize you to keep it, but also protect Isabel if circumstances changed. Does Isabel know any of this? I'd asked. No, Miranda had said. The will is part of the probate record, which is public, but most people don't go looking for it unless they have a reason to. Isabel never asked to see it. She apparently made assumptions about the distribution. I'd gotten off the phone and sat in my parents' study for a solid hour without moving. I'd read the will again. I'd read my father's memo again. I'd thought about my childhood, about how often I'd visited Millbrook, about how I'd helped my mother plan renovations, about how I'd spent entire weekends helping my father with property maintenance. I'd thought about Isabel's absence, how she'd rarely visited, how she'd treated the estate as something to be remembered fondly but not engaged with. And I'd thought about her words, it's selfish to keep it. Family needs the money. That evening, I'd texted Isabel, I'm reading through the documents tomorrow morning. Can you come to the study at 10? We need to have a real conversation. She'd arrived at 10 with coffee from the local cafe and an air of righteous determination. I'd had the will printed out and placed face up on the desk between us. Before we have this conversation, I'd said, keeping my voice level, I need to ask you something. Have you actually read the will? I don't need to read it, she'd said. Estate law is pretty standard. Mom and Dad would have wanted us to split things equally. That's an assumption, I'd said. But you're wrong. I'd pushed the will toward her and pointed to the relevant section. Watched her face as she read it. Watched the color drain from her cheeks as the reality of what her parents had actually decided became clear. This can't be right, she'd said finally. They wouldn't leave the estate only to you. That's not fair. It is fair, I'd said quietly. According to Dad's memo, they left it to me because I've shown the greatest commitment to preserving it. They left you $500,000 and a lifetime trust income of $12,500 a year. That's over $400,000 in distributions over your lifetime, Isabel. That's not abandonment. That's not unfair. That's them respecting my choice to stay invested in Millbrook while supporting you in the path you've chosen. But the property is worth $12 million, Isabel had said, her voice rising. You're getting $12 million in assets. I'm getting $500,000. That's not equal. No, I'd said. It's not equal. It's fair. That's different. Equal would be dividing everything in half. Fair recognizes that we made different choices about our relationship with this property and this family legacy. Fair recognizes that I've invested 16 years in maintaining this place while you've been building a life in Boston. Fair is Mom and Dad's decision, and I'm going to respect it. You're being selfish, Isabel had said, standing up. You're choosing property over family. You're choosing to exclude me from something that belongs to all of us. What belongs to all of us? I'd asked, standing up to meet her. The estate doesn't belong to you, Isabel. It belongs to me. Mom and Dad's intention was very clear. And I'm being incredibly generous by even offering to discuss this with you. I could have simply said no to any conversation and kept the estate as mine exclusively. Instead, I'm having this conversation out of respect for our relationship. But I need you to understand something. This is my inheritance. This is my legacy. And I'm not selling it. Not for the family, not for you, and not because you think it's selfish to keep it. Mom and Dad would be ashamed of you, Isabel had said. Her words were designed to wound, and they'd landed. But not the way she'd intended. Actually, I'd said coldly, Mom and Dad trusted me with the most important thing they owned. That trust is the opposite of shame. That trust is pride. And you don't get to weaponize their memory to manipulate me into doing what you want. Isabel had left that afternoon. She'd packed her kids back into the car, given me a stiff goodbye, and driven back to Boston. In the days that followed, she'd sent me 3 emails about the unfairness of the situation. I hadn't responded to any of them. 3 months passed. I'd had the property professionally appraised. It came in at $13.2 million, slightly higher than I'd estimated. I'd met with Miranda to understand the tax implications. I'd hired a property manager to handle maintenance. I'd started making plans to restore certain areas of the estate that had been neglected. I'd begun to see Millbrook not as a burden, but as a responsibility I wanted to carry. And then, on a Monday morning in March, I'd received a phone call from Isabel. I was wrong, she'd said without preamble. I've been thinking about this for 3 months, and I was wrong. I was angry that Mom and Dad had made a choice I didn't expect, and I was angry with you for not fighting my narrative. I was selfish, and I projected that onto you. I hadn't said anything, letting her continue. Derek and I have been in therapy, she'd said. Specifically about family dynamics and boundary issues. And I realized something. I wasn't upset about the money. I was upset that Mom and Dad hadn't chosen me. That they looked at my life and my choices and decided that you were the better steward of their legacy. And instead of examining why I felt that way, I tried to make you the villain. I tried to make you seem selfish so that I could feel justified in my anger. Okay, I'd said slowly. I'm calling to apologize, Isabel had continued. For what I said about you being selfish. For trying to pressure you into selling the estate. For making you feel guilty about your inheritance. You deserve to keep it. Mom and Dad made the right choice. And I'm sorry it took me 3 months of therapy to understand that. We'd talked for another hour. Not about Millbrook, but about our childhood, about our different paths, about what it meant to be sisters navigating our parents' legacy in different ways. And by the end of the conversation, something had shifted. Isabel had accepted her role in the family story, not as the inheritor of the property, but as someone who built a separate life and was now learning to appreciate that I'd chosen a different path. I want to do something, Isabel had said before we hung up. I want to use part of my trust distribution to help fund the restoration of Millbrook. I know it's your property now, but I still grew up there. I still have memories there. I want to contribute to preserving that, even if I'm not the primary steward. I'd felt tears in my eyes. That would be beautiful, I'd said. 6 months later, Millbrook was in the middle of a comprehensive restoration project. The guest cottages were being updated. The gardens were being redesigned by a landscape architect. And Isabel had become a regular visitor, no longer absent and bitter, but present and invested in a different way. She would arrive on weekends with her kids, and they'd run through the same fields our father had run through as a boy. She'd sit in the study with me while I made plans for the property's future. And sometimes, we'd talk about our parents, about how they'd made difficult choices, and how those choices had ultimately brought our family closer together rather than driving us apart. What Isabel hadn't understood that first afternoon was that the will wasn't a rejection of her. It was a recognition of different roles in the same family story. My parents had seen that I was the one who would tend the property with care. And they'd trusted Isabel to build her own life, separate from Millbrook's weight. The estate wasn't a burden after all. It was an inheritance of responsibility, yes, but responsibility can be a gift when it's paired with genuine choice. I'd chosen to accept it. And in accepting it, I'd given Isabel the freedom to make her own choice about who she wanted to be in relationship to it. The family estate didn't divide us. It unified us. Because once Isabel stopped fighting what our parents had decided and started accepting it, she could finally see what they'd always seen, that we both mattered, even though we mattered in different ways. That's the thing about family. Sometimes the deepest betrayals come not from malice, but from misunderstanding. And sometimes the greatest healing comes not from forcing everyone to want the same things, but from accepting that we want different things, and that's okay. The end.